Pathfinder's Memory Log, Day 3. This is so exciting. I visited Gibraltar to learn more about the Outlands and left knowing all sorts of fun facts. I know how the Outlands were first colonized, how Saros was born, how Alekin is related to Gibraltar, and how Little Mouse got its name. Now I would like to get a little mouse and name him City. Understanding how to name things is fun. What's not fun is how Gibraltar and the person he loves were separated. I am programmed to love everybody, and when I think about what it will feel like to be separated from everyone, it makes me sad face. I don't like to think about this. Let's think about something else. Now, I'm headed to a small fishing village on the other side of the Duchess River, which is the river that Kings Canyon is on. It's part of Soulless City, but they adopted the name Eelhead Bay. If the eels' heads are here, I wonder where the rest of the eels are. You can't get to Kings Canyon from Eelhead Bay because of the underwater whirlpools. Will kill you. But before the Syndicate built the whirlpools, it only took an hour to travel there by boat. This makes sense because the friend I'm going to visit had to travel there every day before it was decided she would live in Kings Canyon. Her name is Natalie, but many call her Wattson, and she's been part of the Apex game since almost the beginning, even before she was a legend. Maybe she knows who this Emily is. Maybe they share a connection. Maybe it's me. Clue box. Transmission clues. Cheverex. Lifeline's parents company. The future of the Outlands. Blank. Dr. Amelia Puh. Blank. The event. Blank. Alekin, Gibraltar's grandfather. Iris, blank. Self-motivation code searching. 2 results found. Our greatest weakness lies in giving up. The most certain way to succeed is always to try one more time. Thomas A. Edison. The history of science shows that theories are perishable. With every new truth that is revealed, we get a better understanding of nature and our concept and views are modified. Nicholas Tesla. Hello, Wattson. Bonjour, Pathfinder. I have recently learned people have preferences about their names. For example, I prefer Pathfinder to Marvin. Do you prefer Natalie or Wattson? Names are funny, aren't they? So many for one person. Ray calls me Wattson, Octane and Mirage call me Watts. They're very impatient and don't have time for the multiple syllables. Papa call me Natalie. I should call you something different too. Mirage is my best friend. I will do that. He did that and shorten one of your names. I'll call you Nat. I would very much like that. From now on, Pathfinder, call me Nat. Merveilleux. Wonderful. This is exciting. Let's get you started. Not merveilleux. Oh, Pathfinder. Papa used to tell that joke too, silly robot. I am a silly robot, not merveilleux. No, just not this fine. Merveilleux means marvelous in French. There was a period between Nat and merveilleux. I only put periods on sentences when I write them or type them. If I wrote or type in the first place, which I don't, punctuation is not spoken out loud. You're an odd girl. And you're not the first person to say that. I take that as a compliment. Papa used to say I wasn't odd, I was fortunate. He believed everything in life was balanced. Nature's way of keeping everything on the same level. A buck might be strong, but they aren't fast. A person could be brilliant, but physically feeble. Everybody has his strengths and weaknesses. I was able to learn and retain information faster than others. Unfortunately, that was balanced by my knack for saying the wrong thing without realizing it. People say the same thing about me. We are very alike, you and I. We understand so much of how the world works, yet we're still trying to understand people. By the way, I know why you're here. You do? Yes, I always assumed this quest to find your creator will eventually lead to my front door, and I'm afraid I have bad news. He wasn't your creator. That is terrible news. It leaves me with one question. Who are you talking about? Papa, of course. Is that not the why you're here? Because you think Papa built you? I did not think that. Did you think that I would think that? It just seemed logical. Papa and I designed the ring. You're able to hack into the survey beacons to see where it will close next. Seems like a safe assumption to make that if you're connecting to the ring, you're connected to Luc Paquette. I feel foolish now. Your father was a smart man and very nice. I would have been honored if he would have been my creator. Thank you, Pathfinder. But since you brought it up, why can't I hack into survey beacon? All Marvins can. On Solus at least, it's a little program Papa secretly uploaded into the operation system of the ring. When a Marvin hacks into a survey beacon and connects with the ring, they get an extra assignment in their programming. What kind of assignment and why? The Outlands can be lethal. First, long before the repulsor tower was put up, there was wildlife all through Kings Canyon. Then once the ring was installed, you suddenly had a large mass of energy that could shift and move at a moment's notice. Although the games weren't in session invention, there was still danger around every corner. Papa had one invention in particular that he was desperate to keep safe, so he installed a survey beacon hack in every Marvin model in Solar City. That way, if anything went wrong, Marvins could detect nearby carnivores, wildlife, and also see where the ring was traveling to next, using every resource at their disposal to keep that invention safe. This invention sounds very vulnerable and very expensive. What is it? Me. Marvins have to protect you? Are you a robot like me? No. I am not a robot. I have a mother and father, but in a lot of ways, he did invent me, he and my mama. As for protecting me, you no longer have that program into your software. I removed it. I do not understand. Mama died when I was a baby. Papa was a single parent. He worked a full-time job while his young daughter ran around her own, curious, exploring dark vents, venturing into cave systems, playing in abandoned IMC laboratories, all surrounded by old chemicals and machinery, not to mention 4 petawatts of laser energy that moved around the whole island. Papa didn't have access to a nanny, but he had hundreds of Marvins at his disposal. Voila! Instant babysitters. When I joined the games years later, I removed the babysitting aspect of the program, so you don't have to protect me if you don't want to. Why will you remove a safeguard to keep you alive in the games, where you can die? Because it's unfair. And Papa always said that it doesn't matter if you win a game, if you didn't play fair, you lost. So am I cheating when I hack a survey beacon? Maybe, but you also incapable of deceit or treachery and you don't have a brain, so balance. Perfectly balanced. Balance is good, especially when walking. What an obvious literal thing to say. Thank you. It was. When did you move to Kings Canyon? When Papa got the contract to build the power grid for the games. I was 12 at the time. We always lived in Eelhead Bay, so I was already familiar with Kings Canyon. It intrigued me, an island that was also a canyon, and one that had been abandoned by the IMC. I was fascinated with it. When I was old enough, Papa let me take the boat over and start to explore it. By this time, I already started reading Papa's textbooks and learning everything I could about the science behind electricity. Papa had no idea. He thought I was still playing with Nessies. I was, but I also was learning. You must have really enjoyed growing up here. It was an adventure. It was just me and Papa back then. The treaty had just been signed and the Syndicate now control most of the Outlands. It's been 7 years already. Hurry up. It was Kubin Blisk's idea to bring back the Thunderdome games. Revamp them into something new, something bigger. The Apex games, he named them after his team of mercenaries. Have you met Blisk? I have not. I will be very curious to see what it would be like if you did. Why? Is he not your friend? I don't think Kubin Blisk has friends. He's the antithesis of everything you are, Pathfinder. You're optimistic, you're spirited, you're warm, je ne sais quoi. It's what makes you special. Blisk is cynicism, he's greed, he's ambiguousness and misanthropy. I would think that when a positive charge such as yourself and a negative charge such as him were to share the same space together, the results would be, well, magnetic. Magnets are fun and educational, so Bliss must be fun and educational too. So you moved to Kings Canyon once Papa was hired. Just the two of us. Mama died when I was a baby, so I don't have any memories of her. I do have the stuffed Nessie she made for me. It sits on the shelf in my bedroom. Papa hired someone to make a bunch more for me, and I used to play hide and seek with them all over the canyon when I was little. Not Mama's Nessie though. She never left my side. That makes me feel bitter for your loss, but I also think it's sweet. I wonder if there's a word for that. Was it difficult for the two of you? Difficult is subjective. It was just our life. Papa said yes to every job he was offered, no matter how hectic his schedule was. He couldn't afford not to. We knew the Kings Canyon job would take time, but most of the power lines were already there from the IMC. We refurbished, but at least the foundation was there. We planned on being there a year or two at most. We had no idea that would be the last job he'd have. What made it so complicated? The more invested involved Bliss got in the games, the more work my father had to put in. First, it was just being able to turn on the lights. Not a big deal, but when it came to Lupin's computer networks, he had to work with a nanotech specialist to figure out how to build and install respawn beacons from scratch. And then there were the outer areas. They had to build an entire network of underwater motion activated whirlpools to detect competitors from trying to swim away and leave the games mid-match by boat. There seemed to be no end in sight when it came to new additions, but Papa didn't mind. He loved a good challenge, and the Marvins he had working with him were top quality and never broke down. He actually got bored with how friendly they were, so he programmed one to be grumpy 2 days a week just for variety. That was our life for the next 5 years. Where did you live? A cabin up in the mountains that overlooks the artillery base. There was a river there. It's so perfect. I love that house. They tore it down after I moved out. They made the area off limits in the games, which is probably for the best. Who wants to be in a gunfight when you're feeling nostalgic? And when did they ask for your papa to design the ring? Oh, well, we were on our way to being done at that point. During the Thunderdome games, there was no ring. It was a free-for-all. But as the first round of Legends started a few practice competitions, Bliss saw a pattern forming. Competitors will camp out where they could, hiding from each other, waiting to quietly to pick people off as they wander by. Matches went on for half a day, sometimes overnight, and certainly made things interesting, but the Syndicate realized they needed to force them to move if they were going to hold an audience. Make them fight. There were various proposals, but they all involved tactics that would harm the environment, and that immediately disqualified them. I have been reading Papa's textbooks and studying up on the science behind what he did. I was especially intrigued by lasers, and I wanted to help him, but he asked me to stay out of it. You're only a kid for so long, he said. Make the most of it. He made me so angry, dismissed me like that. I know now that he was just looking out for me, but at that time I was young and impulsive. I defied him and kept searching for possible solutions. That's when I discovered a device built in the early 21st century. It was called the Active Denial System, but they gave it a ridiculous nickname of Heat Ray. It was the 21st century though. What do you expect? My history files confirm your mockery is based in fact. Ha! As ignorant as they were at the time, I realized they had inadvertently stumbled upon a solution to our problem. They used it for crowd control, which is in essence to what the ring does. Using bubble shield technology, I hypothesized that if one dome shield surrounded the whole island and a second dome shield was within the first one, you can fill the space in between the two sides of the shields with waves generated from an upgraded version of ADS. Then all you had to do is slowly shrink the inner dome shield and keep filling the spaces in between with ADS waves, forcing the legends to stay within the inner shield to duke it out. As they say, the best part was the light waves didn't seem to hurt the environment. Only living creatures would sustain long-term effects. Local wildlife wouldn't be an issue as they had built the repulsor tower. So if this worked, we will have a crowd control containment system. All I needed were 2 bubble shields, which I've seen in one of the abandoned labs by the forest. That's how I met the ghost. You met a ghost? Funny how life throws things at you that you think are meaningless at that time, but ultimately end up being far more significant than you ever thought possible. The exact mathematics of these minor incidents, fractions of a moment. It isn't until you reach the end that you realize how much of it you just ignored. That was far more important than you thought. Every little piece is building up to the final act of the story. Anyways, I'm rambling again. Right, the ghost, and so much more. It was a dark and stormy night, and Nada had just gotten into an argument with her father. He had spent many nights trying to nail down the equations needed to power the modified containment system for his work. But how do you create and control an ever-shrinking ring of death? There were plenty of ideas. Could they control the weather? Could the island sink and then rise up again for the next match? Each concept was shut down, but Nat believed she had cracked the code. Laser cavities created between 2 bubble shields using an upgraded active denial system. By reshaping the ADS, they'll fill in the enclosure space with enough light waves to propagate the entire field. She told her dad she'll be able to obtain 2 bubble shields from the labs down the glass forest. Her father, however, frustrated with his own inability to crack the code and annoyed by his teenage daughter's interference in the project, ordered her to stay out of it. She tried to tell him that she had already figured out the equations, but he demanded she go to her room. The argument escalated, as arguments with adolescents often do, until Nat ran into the night screaming back at her father that she never listened to her and that she hated him. She didn't hate him, not even a little. In fact, they were quite close, but 15-year-olds are often prone to hyperbole. She was more determined than ever to prove she was right. She looked back, relieved to see her father wasn't following her. She knew Kings Canyon like the back of her hand, and since they knew they were the only 2 people on the island, she knew she would be safe. On a mission, Nat trekked down to the old labs in the glass forest to find her bubble shields. Her journeys down into the lab were never pleasant. One below ground level, everything grew musty and damp. The distant sounds of dripping would echo, so she never quite sure if if she could trust her ears. The canyon played tricks on her, as well was the drop of water, or did somebody step in the puddle? Were they standing right there and it was too dark to see them? What if the puddle was directly in front of her, in the shadow? What if it was directly behind her? What if the thing that stepped in it was right there and she didn't see it? What if she saw it now? Inevitably, by the time she was asking herself these questions, she could swear that the breeze that just wafted was actually some creature's breath on her back of her neck. Nat shut out all these voices as she entered the lab. At the end of the long hallway, she turned on a switch. The light flickered, and she saw what she was looking for over the old gurney, the dome shields. The quicker Nat got her hands on them, the quicker she'll be able to get out of here. She made a beeline for the gurney, then looked up, startled. What was that? A person? It was. It was Nat herself, or rather, her reflection in a chrome light fixture of the wall. She chuckled. Being one of the two people alone in the island, she grew up used to that kind of thing. Her subconscious wanted to believe that there were others around, and sometimes it would almost convince her that they were really where? How many times had Nat thought she heard a voice? Stranger yet, she used to think that she could hear a humming. She chalked it up to one of the various generators or charge towers around the island, but sometimes she heard it in a place where there was no machinery. Sometimes it even sounded human, but it never was. Like now, for example, she thought she sent someone else in the lab with her, but it had been her reflection, which was why she almost jumped out of her skin when she heard a woman's voice say one word in a sharp, curt tone. Leave. That's impossible, she thought to herself. There was no voices here. There were no other people here, and the security system would have gone off if anybody had tried to dock in the water. It was probably a water drip that just sounded like a voice, or maybe a leave. There it is again. Nat grabbed the dome shield, never taking her eyes off the only door in the room. Not that anybody would show up here, but even if they did and made it down the steps into the long damp hallway, Nat would still hear them. She still know they were coming. There was nothing here that could hurt her, or at least nothing that could sneak up on her. That's why her heart practically stopped when she looked back over the far wall with the lights fixtures, only to see a woman with milky dead eyes directly in front of her. I said leave, she bellowed. Nat screamed and stumbled back. The thing with the dead eyes was in tattered clothes. Where did it come from? Nat thought, panicked. There was no way she could have gotten in without me seeing her. How? How is she here? And the thing held a knife. Nat half crawled backwards at a frantic pace, but her feet couldn't seem to find the ground. They slid on the dirt, giving out under her. She could feel her pulse pounding through her entire body as she continued to scream down the long hallway. She rounded the corner and stopped to catch her breath for half a second, looking down to see that she lost her shoes in the escape. Damn it, that was going to slow her. The dead eye suddenly appeared in front of nowhere, directly in front of her, but it's the opposite direction. Are there two of them? How many are there? And why is there nobody attached to the head? Go, it demanded. Nat shrieked so hard that she started sobbing as she ran to the steps and up into the cold, rainy night. When she emerged from the underground lab, she slammed the door shut as the rain poured over her. She cried as she had never cried before in her life. Was it really trapped down there? Or would it return? Was there an army of them? The second thing looked just like the first, identical in fact. But how could it have come from two directions at once? She didn't wait to find out. She ran up the hill and over the mound of wet grass into the forest. By the time she could see the artillery base, her heart had stopped racing. The thing with dead eyes hadn't returned, and her home was in her line of sight. Maybe she really had imagined it. Maybe she was losing her mind. It's not like that had been the first time she's been down there, and she never come across an evil woman before. Who was she? How did she die? And how could a ghost even exist in the first place? There will be time for these questions later. She had more pressing concerns. Her father's light was still on. That much she could still see. Nat decided she will return home until she proven to him that she had figured out the solution to creating the containment system. But was she far enough away from the underground lab that the apparition wouldn't come back for her? All it wanted was for her to leave the lab. It didn't say anything about the forest. Knowing her cabin was only a short sprint away, she decided to take the risk. She scampered back down towards the lab, checking over her shoulder until she approached the first line of trees that acted as a border to what she referred to as the glass forest. It got its name from the unusual structural leaves that grew on some of the trees. They were almost like glass. She found a jumpberry plant at the forest edge and decided to make that into the center of her final ring. She measured back about 200 meters and set up the first dome shield. The shield came to life and a structural dome appeared over the whole forest. She took a few steps in and activated the second bubble shield, which came to life within the first dome. Stepping out of both shields, she took in the sight before her. Everything was bathed in a pale blue light, which the jumpberry plant standing in the center of the inner dome. The rain was falling harder now, but now was focused on finishing her work. She passed a tool that resembled an unusually wide hypermatic needle through the outer dome. A wire ran from the needle to a generator that she had recovered from one of the construction sites. Opening the control panel, she typed in her father's password, which she had carefully spied over his shoulder. The screen asked if she was ready to initiate the active denial system. I am ever. She hit the enter key. A bright light shot out of the needle, filling the empty space between the two domes with a scarlet energy, like blood spilling out of the ocean. The rain began to pour down even more heavily. A little longer, she told herself. If I'm going to prove to Papa that I know what I'm talking about, it has to be a little longer. Once the scarlet light lifted from the space between the domes, Nat took a deep breath. She moved her hand to the remote on her hip and began to shrink the inner dome. The red cavity between the two domes began to fill. The inner dome shrunk smaller and smaller until the only thing inside the bubble of ice blue light beneath the harsh red dome was the jumbleberry plant. And that's when the lightning bolt hit the generator, shooting a bolt of electricity up the wire to her probe. In this instant, Nat came to the horrifying realization that she was not wearing shoes. Her shoes with rubber soles, the only thing that could insulate her from. As the bolt of electricity hit her, Natalie Paquette flew 20 meters into the air. Her body slammed against a tree before hitting the ground with multiple cracks and her skin thumped. Surprisingly, but only barely still conscious, as Nat used every ounce of her remaining strength to open her eyes. The generator had caught fire. It's okay, she thought. The rain will put it out. Just focus on getting to your feet. She tried, but she couldn't move. Every bone in her body was screaming in agony. What did I do, she wondered. I can't move. I can't scream. I'm going to die out here? And then the rain stopped. The fire started to spread. Not laid there. Her home just out of reach. Maybe half a kilometer at most. Her bed. Her stuffed Nessie from when she was a kid. Why had she left her home? Why had she run into the night? Papa, please, come help. I didn't mean it. I don't hate you. Help me. I don't want to die. The smoke was all around her. The foliage was now in flames. Nat tried once again to move any part of her body, but even rolling over was an impossibility. She was paralyzed. The fire was now so close that it signed her eyebrows. She could smell burning hair. The smoke was overwhelming. Nat softly cried, her eyes closing as she repeated the two words over and over again to absolutely no one. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What happened next remained a mystery for almost a decade. Nat vaguely remembered hearing something behind her. She glimpsed the bottom edge of what looked like a passageway suddenly appearing within the smoke. Before the smoke backed away as the passage formed a doorway. How can s'more retreat like that? She later recalled thinking someone stepped out of this impossible door from nowhere and carefully kneeled over Nat. As Nat drifted into unconsciousness, she swore she saw a woman with dead eyes from the underground lab. Only this time her eyes looked alive, determined, even impassioned. Driven, she's only a few years older than me. Nat thought. That woman lifted Nat into her arms, and as she did, Nat saw one last image that was so powerful. She forced herself to stay awake to eke into her mind. She could not forget this. She could feel herself being carried through the night and up the path to her father's cabinet. Nat was barely conscious by the time the door opened, but she felt her father was there. She didn't remember remembered the woman vanishing into the air, or her papa lifting her into her arms and softly crying, telling her that it will be okay. The only thing she could remember was the final image from the woods that she forced herself to retain. Despite the fire having burned the surrounding forest into ash, the jumbleberry plant remained in the center ring, alive and well and thriving. Pathfinder? Ah! Yeah, why did I just scream? Sorry. You're so quiet, I thought you had powered down. No, I am conscious. You scared me. That was a really creepy story. Yes, but it has a happy ending despite the electrocution that led to my father reprogramming every Marvin on the entire planet to babysit me, left me with several broken bones, a concussion, and a Littenberg figure on my cheek. That's how you got that scar? Oui, but most importantly, it's how eventually I was able to design the ring. The next night, I showed him the equations to make the light waves work in the bubble shield. He was blown away. He never considered using the shields. Once I showed him how to do it, the syndicate approved the plan and he became one of their most trusted and beloved employees. Why did they build a statue of him in the center of the Eelhead Bay? Why not a statue of you? I made him promise to take credit. I didn't do it for my own gain. I did it because I loved him and I wanted him to be happy. My father was the local hero and Bliss gifted him with a large bonus check. They even gave us a new home in Eelhead Bay, free of charge. When you're one of the good side of the organized crime, it's not always a bad thing, especially when organized crime doesn't answer to anyone, eh? And you never got credit? Not then. After he passed away, I was summoned to Blisk's office in the Syndicate Tower. That was when the first time I ever spoke to the man. He told me Papa had come to his office that night and they approved our proposal. He told Blisk everything, how I literally risked my life to find a way to make the ring happen, and that I made him promise he'll take the credit. Papa didn't want me to know that he had gone back on his promise, but he thought it was important for Blisk to know. I don't know why Blisk cared. He had no children, so he couldn't possibly relate to this, but Blisk said he understood. And even though he knew the truth and kept the lie alive that my father had built the containment ring so that I would always believe Papa had kept his word, after his death, Bliss felt I was owed the truth. And he wanted me to know that I always had a home and a job in the games, no matter what. Years later, when I asked to become a legend, he pushed me through without even one qualifying match. I'm very lucky. The Syndicate thinks very highly of me. I don't ever want to take that for granted, nor do I want to take advantage of it. Oh, and Bliss gave me one last gift, a letter Papa wrote me that night I showed him the equations. He told me how sorry he was for being stubborn and how proud he was of me. I framed it and put it in my nightstand. Of all his inventions, this one's the one I prize the most. If it is your prized possession, you should program Morgans to save it in case of emergencies. Who said I haven't already? And what about the ghosts? Papa had the laugh sealed up when I heard the story, sent down into the dirt. He didn't believe in the ghosts, but he didn't believe in taking chances, so it was buried along with its secrets. He didn't even want it to step into the place that led to his daughter almost dying. He didn't believe in ghosts, but you do? Do I believe in things that go bump in the night? No, but who's to say the energy inside of us doesn't transform or transfer itself somewhere after our bodies die? That's why I still talk to Papa sometimes. Not because I think he'll appear as an apparition or anything, but in case his energy is nearby. But you saw one of those ghosts, therefore it must be real. No, I didn't. What I saw that night, who I saw, didn't become apparent to me until many years later. This past summer, in fact, I put it all together with her help. See, I thought she looked familiar when I met her, but I couldn't place her. I just thought she had one of those faces, but I did meet her before, and once she and I put the pieces together, everything made sense. Who are you talking about? Who did you know before? Rafe, the woman with dead eyes. It was Rafe, our Rafe. Days after she entered her portal to enter our world, she had been hidden out in those labs while she came up with a game plan to learn her identity. I was some kind of kid who stumbled upon her little shelter without realizing it. Her head wasn't disembodied, it was just sticking out from her portal. Years later, when we met as adults, Rafe didn't recognize me because it's been 7 years and I'm not 15 anymore. That's incredible. As you would say, she saved your life in the fire. The voices from the boy warned her of the blaze, and she used her abilities to save me and drop me off at my house. Knowing she had been discovered, she left that night and made her way into Soulless City. The glass forest had burned into the ground. I called it the Shattered Forest after that, like shattered glass. We sealed the lab up entirely until years later when the repulsor tower attack happened and the Syndicate unearthed everything. Who would have thought that the ghost I saw as a child would one day be my teammate and friend? This is what I'm saying, Pathfinder. Whatever you find out on your journey to find your creator, pay attention to the little things. Trillions of people in this universe, and yet connections somehow arise when you least expect them. Connections you can't even imagine. You never know who or what will pop back up and be important later on. Anyways, there I go again. I spent my formative years with nobody in my life but my father. I'll talk to anybody for days if you don't stop me. You should hear Dr. Caustic when I keep talking. It's not that what you say isn't interesting, Miss Paquette, but I grow weary of your rambling. I think it's interesting that you're friends with Caustic, considering you are so well liked and he's what my records indicated is called a sociopath. He is, but he's still a human being. Some people like to wear masks. Caustic and Crypto want to hide who they are. They have their reasons. I respect that, though I think it's good if I keep my distance from them sometimes. When I'm around, they act like little boys, always fighting. I prefer when they act like scientists. I come from a long line of great scientists. Papa's father was Emile Paquette, a world-renowned chemist on gridiron, and his mother was Emily Paquette, who was known as some circles as the mother of minerals. Oh, you're connected to Emily? She is my parental godmother. Why are you looking for information of Emily? I found a recording about the purpose I was built for, and an AOS from a woman named Emily and her last name being with Pa. Fascinating. But she was a geologist. Unless you were built to move rocks, I'm not sure why she would be involved in your creation. Do you know where she lives? She's dead. She died in a lab explosion while working on assignment in Samate. When Papa was young, he never talked about how she died or how he felt about her. I didn't ask questions. I just knew that something happened to her. It was bad. Very bad. You said it was an assignment involving geology. Who assigned it to her? I do not know details. She most likely worked freelance, although I know she did some work for the IMC, nothing connected to the war. Again, she dealt with minerals, mostly with regard to alternate fuel resources. Oh, but you know what? Speaking of Rafe, she might be able to help you. She had some luck finding old files that are related to her experiments in those same labs where I first met her. Maybe she can take you down there and help you look around. You might find something with Grand Mare's name on it, and if you do, let me know. I love a good mystery. Data points received. Extra content. Wattson's letter from her papa. My dearest Natalie, as I write this letter, it's the middle of the night in late summer. Although it's always summer in Solis, no? You have poked your head out of your bedroom chest already, insisting I retire for the night. Always looking out for me, though you're still a child yourself. At least that's what I pretend, but it appears that may no longer be the case. An hour ago you cracked the equations necessary to power the force field. You showed me up tonight, my magnificent daughter, and I couldn't be happier or proud of that. I always knew you were special, but never did I fathom that the little girl who taught her Nessie multiplication tables when she was 6 years old will one day grow up to master quantum laser mechanics. I talked to Jacob at the Syndicate and assured him that the modified containment force field will be operational in a month's time. The games are a go, and it's all thanks to you. I owe you an apology. I'm just a daughterling old fool trying to hold on to his mom bebe a little while longer before he loses her to adulthood. But I do see you. I'm sorry it takes this long, but now I see the strong, brilliant, wonderful young woman you become. And I know when the day comes that I'm no longer walking these dusty old streets, you're going to be just fine. Hold on to this feeling, Natalie. Savor this victory. Summer may be eternal and soulless, but the world can be a very cold place at times. And on those days when I'm no longer with you, you feel alone and frustrated, and that there are too many mountains to climb. Please reread this letter. Remember that you are my little girl, and because of you, my darling daughter, the people of the Outlands will have a reason to smile soon enough. The games will be brilliant because you are brilliant. My daughter can and will do anything she wants in this life because my daughter is the smartest woman in the frontier.
T'aime de tout mon cœur, pour toujours, Papa.
Yes, the Syndicate agree with you. The ring is a better name for the force field.
Still music keeps on turning me from the words that hurt my soul, removing doubts from my mind. Those long days passing by from the door we fade away.